Hey, well, we'll get started because there's a lot of material to cover. Thank you all for joining us, whether you're on Zoom or in the room. This is Introduction to StoryMaps. It's about an hour-long workshop about how to use this digital storytelling application. And if you haven't used it before, there's a lot kind of to learn. I think it has, I would say, a low to medium learning curve. So we're going to help you get started with it by going over some of the things that you need to do to get it going. And if you haven't used it for a while, if you used it in the past, but not lately, I think you'll find that there's been a lot of updates. So this also might be worthwhile for you there. My name is Janet Reyes. I'm the Geospatial Information Librarian here at UC Riverside. And this workshop is being recorded. And maybe next week sometime, after we get the captioning edited, you'll find a recording of it on the library's YouTube channel, which has recordings of other workshops as well. And so if you have registered for this workshop today, or I have your email address, I will be sending you an email that has a copy of the slides. The slides have a lot of useful links, so I think it'll be a good resource for you. And also, you'll be able to access the recording on the library's website, and I think we've shared that link in the chat already. I have a helper today. Her name is Stephanie. She's just going to be monitoring the chat for me because it's a little tricky from being a presenter to see everything that's going on. And she'll also be pasting some of the links and things into the chat that I want to share with you. Including at the end, we have a survey, and I know we're all tired of taking surveys, but this really does help me understand whether I've met your expectations in giving this workshop or not. So hopefully you won't mind just taking a minute to complete that survey. I think that is all the housekeeping. Oh, there is one thing special for today. On campus today, we have had a few internet outages, and I'm hoping that does not happen in the next hour. But if it does, if I suddenly disappear and you're on Zoom, I'll try to wait and see if it gets back. However, if it's a long time and internet doesn't come back, I will at a later time record this workshop in its entirety and set on the YouTube channel. So you'll have this information one way or the other. Okay, thanks for all your patience while I went through those things. And now let's get started. So here's the outline for what we're going to talk about today. Introduction, of course, is what is a story map, the essential things you need to have, and the optional components, some basic tips about creating one. And then we get really into the heart of today's workshop, which is using the story map builder. There's a lot of options, and I feel like it's my duty to show you what all those options are. There's going to be a lot of information coming towards you when we get to this section. So hopefully it'll just be your first exposure to all the different kinds of things you can do with the story map. And I have a slide with lots of links to resources. And then at the very end, I have a slide or two or three that has alternatives to ArcGIS story maps, because this is not the only option you have. And I feel it's worthwhile for you to see what else is out there in case this particular app doesn't meet your needs. So with that, let's get going on the introduction. What is a story map? Well, there's a couple definitions here on the screen. The first one is a little bit lengthy. It talks about a web app first developed by Esri, in which media maps and more can be combined to create an interactive narrative for creating awareness, influencing opinion, and affecting change. So let's back up a little bit on some of those things. Esri, if you don't know, it's a company in Redlands, California, which is just 15 miles away from our Riverside campus here. Its headquarters is in Redlands. They have offices around the world now, and they probably have the largest market share in geographic information system technology and software. So they are quite a big player in the field of internet and digital maps. And they have taken to branding almost all of their products with the phrase at the beginning, ArcGIS. So that's why the thing I'm showing you today is called ArcGIS StoryMaps. We'll talk about ArcGIS Online in just a couple minutes. That's something that's related to having an account here with StoryMaps and stuff. So anyway, that's the reason it's called ArcGIS StoryMaps. The second definition on that screen is a little more poetic, a means of harnessing the power of maps to help tell your story. And when I see that phrase, I have a little asterisk in my head, and in a few slides from now, I will tell you why I have a little asterisk, like a however kind of thought going through my head. So I think rather than just talking in words about what a story map is, I would like to show you a couple of examples so you get an idea. And what I'll do is maybe just point out some of the features of the story map as we go. And the reason I'll do that is because later on, we'll see how that's created on the back end. Let's take a look at the first one. Okay, this is a story map that was created in a class at UCR back in 2020. And it was a class project. So every student in the class contributed to this story map. As you can see, we have a cover picture and a title. I'm going to scroll down and you see some navigation tabs. These will let us jump around in the story map because it's quite a long one. So it's a good idea to have these navigation tabs available. You can see that there's a map here. So I'm scrolling, different options come up on the side. I can also hover over the map and click on something, and it takes me to a little description about the thing that's going on in that place. Let me just use my navigation tabs here to show you some other things. So this is one student talked to somebody who lives in Muscoy about their experiences with environmental health. And so you can see there's a heading, there's an image with a caption, a paragraph here. And what they chose to do was create a video. They drove around the neighborhood and they're narrating it as they talk about what they see in the neighborhood. So that's one thing you can have a video story map. Next one I want to show you is Montana. Here we have another image, but this time the paragraph kind of wraps around the image. And the image has a caption. And then in this case, the student recorded audio of the person she interviewed or he interviewed, and you can click on this to start listening to that audio. So the idea, you can have video, audio, images. Here's something that looks different in terms of the font. This is what's known as a quote. This is a separator. So lots of things going on here. And if we go all the way to the end, see there's a credits section different from the body of the story map. So if you wanted to acknowledgements or references that you used in creating the story map, you could have that at the end. I'm going to show you now the other example of a story map with a few other different types of things going on. This one was created by the Esri StoryMaps team. And I think this is a very intriguing cover, right? To have this bug kind of wandering around right at the outset. This is a story map about invasives. So as I'm scrolling down, there's some text that's kind of hovering over the map. As I get to a certain point, the map changes. We get another set of text that's related to what we're looking at on the map. Now it zooms in again. An image that's in that text. Now we see the map changing again. There's a hyperlink here we can have in the text. They do a lot with maps in this story map, as you can see. There's the bug again. Here's a different section where they're talking about mussels. And they have an animated map here. So it's going to show how this invasive species spread over time, year by year. So that's kind of an interesting feature. I'm going to scroll down some more. Here's a gallery of images related to the lanternfly. The caption, and then this again, and then this list at the end. What can you do? So this is an interesting kind of list. I'll show you what it's made with later on. And then at the end, we have another type of map where you have different types of invasive species, and you can click on this, see where it is on the map, and then there would be perhaps some extra text about what's going on with that feature. Here are some additional resources. These are what are known as cards. Clicking on this will take you to a different website. And then again, at the end, we have credits, including some of the citations that are referenced in the story map. So that gives you an idea of the kinds of things you can do with the story map, right? Well, let's talk about what the essentials are and the optional components. Well, one thing you absolutely need to make a story map is an ArcGIS online account. For those of us who are affiliated with UCR, we go to the URL that you see there. It's called ucr.maps.arcgis.com. You click sign in, and that takes you to an interface that looks like this. You've got some choices there, so I wanted to point out the thing that you would want to click is the big blue UCR button. When you do that, it takes you to the familiar multi-factor authentication where you type in your NetID and password. And once you do that, you have an ArcGIS online account with the UCR organization, and you will sign in the same way every time. If you are not affiliated with an institution, but you want to make maps or you want to make a story map, there's a couple options for you. This one is that ArcGIS or Esri offers a free ArcGIS public account. It doesn't have all the functionality that you get if you're affiliated with like organization, but it's still something. And you could make a story map by going to this place and signing up. But there's another option that's a little different, but it's another option I'll talk about in just a minute. So let's go back to, we've logged into our account in our ArcGIS Online organization. You can get to creating a story map by clicking on the upper right corner of your screen. There's a matrix with 9 dots. It has all the apps that are within the ArcGIS Online suite of things. And so StoryMaps is one of them. Now, this is a screenshot from my screen, and I've made many story maps over the years. So what I did was drag the icon for story maps up from down here somewhere, just to make it easier for me to find. So maybe the first time that you log in, your ArcGIS story maps icon is not going to be on the top row. It might be further down, but you can drag and drop and rearrange the icons for the apps based on the kind of things that you're using. Now, another way, once you have your account, instead of going through ArcGIS Online each time to get to your story map, what you can do instead is sign in directly from storymaps.arcgis.com. This is the screen that you'll see when you go to that URL, and you see the green button. It says sign into ArcGIS StoryMaps. That's what you would want to click. The thing I was talking about just a second ago, whereas if you're not affiliated, you would need to create that public account. This other blue button at the bottom indicates a rather new option where Esri has created an option for people who don't even want to make an ArcGIS Online account at all. They can create a story map. It's one of those things where it's free for the very basic features, and it's a premium option where you pay a little bit to enable you to have more functionality in creating this it's sort of similar, kind of different type of story map from what we're going to look at. So I know already there's like so many options, and it can be confusing, but I just wanted to point them out to you so you don't get confused. Like today, we're going to be talking about ArcGIS story maps, not this other product that they introduced about a year ago called StoryMaps. Anyway, if you're logging in from that ArcGIS StoryMaps interface, sign in is a little bit different. Before you get to the big blue button, what you'd have to do is you would see this interface, and all you would do is type UCR into this blank to complete the URL, and then it gets you to a screen where you see this this blue button. And then you do that multi-factor authentication, and then you're in. But however you get to your story maps, you're going to end up here, which is, I've just taken portions of a screenshot from the screen that I see. The default is to look at stories, but they do have other options that they've added over the years. The default view that you'll see is the stories, but they do have briefings, and this is the only time I'm going to talk about briefings right now. It's like a slide deck. So if you like the kind of things that you can do with the story map, but for your purposes, presenting using a slide deck makes more sense, then that's what the briefing is. It creates a set of slides rather than having a scrolling experience going on. Collections, that's sort of self-evident. It's like if you have a collection of stories that you want to keep together and just have one URL for that collection, you can build one of those. And then the themes, the fourth thing here is like the appearance of your story map. So the font, the colors, how it all the appearance overall. You can create a custom theme or use some out-of-the-box themes. So anyway, there's all that. Also on the bottom left-hand side of your landing page, there's a lot of quick links. They really want to make sure that you have enough support to make your story map. So they have all kinds of tutorials, and I have an arrow pointing to the Get Started. That's the one I think is really basic, and it's really great for beginners, especially when I was first learning it. I kept going to this one over and over again. So it gives you the basics of how to do kind of what I'm talking about today, basically. So other things that you can do as well. So if you had already created stories like I have, you will see them as cards here on your landing page. When you want to make your first story map, you're going to click that Create Story button at upper right. They added a new button. So I've been refreshing my slides because they keep adding new things, right? So this template is kind of a new feature. What it does is, like, suppose you're teaching a class and you want your class to make their own individual story maps, but you want to provide them with the basic outline of what it's going to look like, and they can just populate with their own content. That would be a template. So there's an option for you to create one of those that would work in that kind of scenario. Okay. So let's talk about what all story maps include. Text and images is my answer. You could do one with all text or all images, but I've never seen that. I don't think that would be very effective. So I think they all pretty much have text and images. But there's optional components. And this is where that asterisk I was talking about a few slides ago comes in, because maps are an option. In a story map, you don't have to have a map in it. They want you to have maps in it, if that makes sense, but you don't need to have one. But then you can see the other optional components are like video or embedded web content, audio, and we saw examples of those in the two story maps we looked at. I didn't show you one that has a 3D web scene, but that's also something you could have. So quite a lot of different functionality going on that you can add to your story. Most importantly, you need a story to tell. So here are some of the frameworks that people have used in creating their story map. They want to do one of these things. So here's some basic tips, and you've probably heard these tips for other items that you've created or put together, whether it's a paper or something else. It really helps to identify what your purpose is in creating the story map, who your audience is going to be. That's going to influence the way you put it together, the language you use, the images you use, and so forth. You also want to think about the key takeaways. What do you want somebody who hasn't seen this before to know or to do or to understand when they're finished doing your story map? It's important or really helpful to choose the best design options for your story. So there's some really whiz-bang things that you can do, right? But if it's not really helping you tell your story, it's better not to put that in. Similarly, the advice is to use concise text and an uncluttered visual presentation. I've seen story maps that really went overboard on lots and lots of words and lots of images, and it just got to be too much. It's like, I'm not going to finish this because it's just too much. So yeah, try to keep it brief and make all the visuals and words that you use meaningful for telling your story. Make your title and your cover image as intriguing and descriptive as possible. That's how you're going to hook your reader. And I think that that second one we looked at with the little lanternfly bug crawling around, that was a really great way, example of how to get somebody's interest. And then give your viewer an action to take at the end. The reason they say at the end is because if you have something that a user or reader can click early on and they click and they go to this other website, they might get so interested in that that they fail to come back to read the rest of your story map. So if you have the option, position those kind of links to other things at the end so that you haven't lost too many readers that way. Now, at the bottom of the next several slides, in the bottom left corner, sorry, I usually include links that will give you more information. So there's more guidance about the basics of creating a story map. And I really like the second link quite a bit. They show you how to make a really bad story map. And it's kind of like, don't do this. It's a really humorous and fun way to get their point across about story map design. Does anybody have any questions before I continue? Because now we're getting into the heavy duty part of this where I'm going to show you all the ways that you can create all these different elements within your story map. Hearing none, we will continue. When you click that green button that says create story, this is what you'll see. You'll have the option to add your story title, a subtitle, and add the cover image or video. You don't have to do it right away before moving on. You can just leave that for later if that suits you. See this green circle with a plus sign in it? That's what you're going to click to add all the other types of elements to your story map. And when you click that circle with the plus sign in it, you get what's called the block palette. On this slide, what I did was break it up. It's really one long scrolly thing, but I wanted to make sure you could see what the words say in the whole block palette. So there's 3 sections of it: basic, media, and immersive. And on the third section here that I did a screenshot for, the immersive, what I did when I took it was to hover over the word sidecar, and that gives you a little pop-up that reminds you what this thing is. So that can be helpful too, because some of these terms, it's like, wait a minute, what is that? What does that do really? So anyway, that's a helpful thing to know. So what we're going to do is take this one section at a time. I'm going to talk through the ins and outs, basically of how to add all of these things in a story map. Let's start with text. As you start typing text, you have choices for the size of the text, whether it's bold or italicized. If you click the little ellipse thing that shows up, you get to do what you see in the middle, a strike through, subscript, or superscript. And then if you click or choose the artist palette, you get to choose a different color for your font if you'd like. They have some recommended colors, and they also, if you choose a color, at the bottom here, this is relatively new, they give it like a value of how legible it is. So that will steer you toward making your story map more accessible and, not picking something that's not enough contrast for some folks to read. The next thing in the basic section of the block palette is, they're buttons and separators. Pretty straightforward. If you add a button, you would put your cursor inside over where it says your text and just create your own text. If you click the pencil for the edit feature, that enables you to insert the URL that the button will take the user to. The separator, well, that's just really basic. That's just a line. But I wanted to show you something of interest here. So what I'll say is, as you're hovering over the things that you've added to your story map, you get this matrix of 6 dots. When you see that, that allows you to drag and drop it around your story map. So you are not stuck with the order in which you first place things. It's very easy to rearrange stuff. So relatively new, they have added the option for you to add code to your story map. and also, also a table, excuse me. There are limits to how big this table can be, and there's also limits to how small it can be. I had a use case not long ago where all we wanted was 3 cells next to each other, and weren't able to do that. It has to have at least 2 rows in the table. So, but this is something we didn't have before, so it's pretty nice to have the option of adding a table. And now we're going to talk about maps for a while. We're now in the media section of our block palette, and they start with maps. So lots to absorb here. When you click that circle with the plus sign in it and choose maps in the block palette, this is what you'll see. If you have made any maps in ArcGIS Online, that's what you're going to see from my content. Those will be in cards that you'll see down below. And things that are in that oval, my favorites, my groups, my organization, most likely those will be things that other people at, in our case, UCR, have created in ArcGIS Online. So you might be able to browse through what other people have created and use that in your story map. The next thing I'm pointing at is public content. This is relatively new option that they've added. It just means that if anybody anywhere in the world has published a map in ArcGIS Online that's publicly available, you can drag it into your story map if you want to. And that might be an option. But we have 2 more options to talk about here with maps: Living Atlas and New Express Map. And I have a slide about each of those. So Living Atlas, very much like that public content, except that these maps, online maps, have been looked at by folks at Esri, curated by them. They're confident that they are good, reliable sources. So public content, it may or may not be super reliable depending on the person and their objectives that made it. But the Living Atlas has been curated, and there's thousands of maps. You can filter it by high-level organization. So in this case, I chose people, but I think another option is environment, something like that. And you can also choose which region of the world that you're interested in and filter it that way. So this is very nice. So you're within your story map. You can go search the Living Atlas and see if there's a map that pertains to the kind of thing that you're trying to illustrate. Express map is something that you make right within the story map. It's supposed to be very simple. It's also, they refer to it as a reference map. So if you just need to show your study area or a few places that you visited, kind of like what the illustration is there. Just a few features, very quick and easy to create it. You don't need much mapping experience at all. So that's another option for your story map. Okay, now we're going to talk about images. And honestly, like an hour before this workshop began, I realized that they had updated these interfaces. So I was copying and pasting like crazy. So they have added, the thing that's different about my slide from 2 hours ago is that they've added a lot more supported file types for images. It used to stop right about there. So they've added all these extra different types of files that you can use to either upload to your story, and also add a URL to an image that you found somewhere else. And then this story, that's also something that they added very recently. What that means is if it's an image that you've already used elsewhere in the story map, you can choose it and use it again in a different place in your story map. So it's possible to edit your images in your story map. You don't have to necessarily do these things before you upload it into the story map. You can crop your image, and you have different options for how you crop it. You have some options again on the dimensions. You can also rotate your image or flip it horizontally. And then if you choose the markup option and you click this pencil, which means I'm going to edit my image, you have markup. So you can add annotation to your image. And you can choose what color that annotation is. It's really remarkable what you can do. So yeah, this was not something that they had first rolled out this version of StoryMaps. This was added, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But it's really nice to have if that suits your purposes. Other things you can do with your image, we saw some examples of where we had a paragraph and that was wrapped around an image. So this is where you determine that. You can choose on the left side or the right side. You can choose how large the image appears in your story map, although if the pixel size is not big enough, it's not going to let you choose medium or large. That's the screenshot I have here is an example of that. Medium and large is grayed out, but yes, I can show it as a small image. You'll see this gear symbol a lot with things that you're adding to your story map. And sometimes the gear implies additive things, sometimes it's specific to the thing that we're talking about. So in this case, this allows you to add attribution and alternative text to an image, allows the user to click on it and make the image larger. And you can add a URL image. And then the ellipse is something else that you'll see in a lot of these content blocks. And in this case, the ellipse lets you replace or delete the image. And then anytime you add an image, there'll be an option for having a caption. You don't have to have a caption, but they give you space for that if you'd like. The next thing is an image gallery. So you have an assortment of images that you want to group together. And we saw an example of that in the invasive species story map, where they had all those images about recordings about the lanternfly. So this is something you can upload. Again, they've added a lot of different file types. I know it's hard to read on this slide, but to me, there's a lot of file types there. My tip is that if you're going to add images, try to get your group together in an image gallery. I had difficulty when I selected a few images and then, oh, I want to add a couple more. It's really hard for me to get those into the image gallery. I don't know if that's been fixed at this point, but I know it works if you just have all your images selected and upload them all at once. And then in this case, the gear symbol opens up image gallery options. So you have 3 options of how that can look. You can have squares that all are the same size. What I have here is a jigsaw. And then the third thing is to have a film strip. So people can click, navigate that. You can have video and audio, as we saw in our book. Again, we added a number of file types very recently, apparently. And you have a choice for video of uploading or linking. For audio, you have a choice of uploading or editing. And I've added the audio file types down here below. That's of interest. You can do those things. Embed. This is probably the most, to me, it seems like the most complex thing with so many options and figuring out what you need to do and what you need to have. But basically either a URL or in some cases an iframe code, what you would use to get this embedded web content into your story map. They have a couple of really handy references. They have a cheat sheet, which is like an infographic about embeds. And then there's also a blog post that's quite lengthy. It goes through all the alternatives and things to think about. But basically, you can have your embedded content represented as a card, as live content, or as alternative media. So I think we could probably spend like a half an hour talking about embeds just by themselves. But yeah, just a flag for you. Give yourself some time if you're thinking about embedding some web content. Make sure you understand all the options for doing that. Wipe. This is a little easier to understand. You have 2 things side by side, and you have divider between them where you can drag and reveal what's on the other side of the line. So typically we have, it's like, it would be like a continuous map, say, but with different content. So this is an example from one of their story maps about population growth in this part of the world. This is 1950 over here, the blue dots on the left, and then the red circles are from 2020, I believe. So really getting the point across of how much some cities have grown in population in this part of the world. And timeline. We looked at that second story map about the lanternfly, and there was a list of things at the end. It wasn't a timeline, but they created that list using this timeline block. So you can see, if you remember what that looked like, it was something like this, where they had big circles and then some content describing things. You have 3 different options for what your timeline could look like. I was playing around with a couple of them here. Just so it really could be any type of list. It could be a timeline. It could be your top 10 whatevers. It could be a list of directions or step-by-step instructions, or for a recipe or something like that. And then a link here I have on this slide doesn't talk just about timelines. It talks about other different ways that you can represent time features. That's pretty interesting. And some other ideas, like how am I going to show how things changed over time? They give you lots of ideas for that. Okay, so now we're on the third and final section of our block palette. It's the immersive. There's only 2 things here. However, the 2 things, they have some options here, so we have to talk about them a little bit. The sidecar. You remember back to the story maps we looked at, I was scrolling and there was text and images kind of rolling by. We had a map in the background. And then after we got to the next text block, the map changed, right? So you do that kind of thing by using a sidecar. You see the top 2 choices there are having your content docked off to the side, or having it kind of floating over the image or the map that you have in the background. And then the third option down below is called slideshow. And slideshow used to be its own separate thing, but they've decided to lump it under the sidecars. It's different enough to me that I preserved my old slide to show you basically what you can do with the slideshow. You can have different images, maps, swipes, embedded material, and people would navigate it laterally. So that kind of gives people a break from all that scrolling, vertical scrolling. So if you have a kind of a long story map, maybe think about inserting something like a slideshow just to give people a break, have them navigate in a different way. Every item in your slideshow will have like this little caption box. You can change that caption box sits in the story, in the on top of the image. But it stays with that image. So you just navigate it. It's kind of like a slide deck in a way. You just clicking and it goes horizontally. And yeah, you have some options there with the ellipse down here. A different layout or duplicate it or something else. So that's a slideshow. The last thing in the block palette is a map tour. Again, we have choices. Map tour lets the user go through a series of places and read about what's at those series of places and also see where it is on the map. There's 2 different ways the user can navigate, or you can set it up for the user to navigate. On the left-hand side is a guided tour. That means for every user who interacts with this, you want them to start at this point, and you want them to go through in a sequence and end up at the last point. If you want them to do that, then you have a choice of how you represent that tour, whether it's the media is taking up the large part of the screen, or if the map is taking up the large part of the screen. The other option for a map tour is Explore, which does not have a set order of things. You can just have people click on different things that are catching their attention, and they can read about them and see where it is on the map just at random. And then, so there's 2 options there as well. You can have those things available in a list or in a grid for your user to explore. So put that slide first, even though when you are going to create a map tour, this is what you'll see first before you get to making those choices. 3 different things you can do. You can start from scratch and just make your map tour right then and there. If you have photos that are geotagged, you can upload them and automatically the points on the map will be created based on what the geotag is. So that is a kind of a shortcut. Or the third thing is if you already have a map in ArcGIS that has a point layer with images stored as attachments, you can use that to create a map tour in your StoryMap. So that was a lot, and I know it's just a lot of choices. Again, I'm just first exposure for you. Hopefully that will help, and you can dive back in at your own leisure to figure out how to use some of these things. But now that we've put some elements in our StoryMap, we're going to look at some design choices and how to preview what it's going to look like. So at the top of your StoryMap, when you're building one, you're going to see, a menu bar. Design is one of the things you can click on. So here's where you can change what your cover layout looks like. There's a default one that you deal with, but then you have options for changing it. Maybe you want the title on one side and the image on the other side, or have it superimposed, or have it superimposed in different ways. It's now up to 6 options. Right before, there were just 2, I think. Those navigation links that we saw in the first StoryMap that enabled you to jump to different sections in the StoryMap, that's an option. You don't have to have them. The second StoryMap that we looked at did not have these navigation links. Both of the StoryMaps we looked at had a credits section at the end. So that's an option that you can add or not. And then you have the option of changing the theme. Remember, I was trying to describe what that was. Here you see, these are the 6 basic themes, the standard themes that you can choose from. Recently, they've added what they call featured themes. So I think it's going to be like a rotating selection. Maybe for a month or 2, you'll see some featured themes that are a little different from these 6 that you could choose. Or you can make your own custom theme. Well, I think the next slide is going to talk about that. And then if your organization has a logo or something, you have a chance to upload that. Oh yeah, theme. If you wanted to make your own theme, this new theme button. And this has also changed recently. I think it used to be just go for it, pick whatever. Now it looks like what they do is take you to one of those 6 basic themes, and you pick one of those that you want to modify. Then it gives you choices. So it's kind of contextual, not letting you get too crazy with creating bad themes or something, I guess is why they did that. But anyway, at the bottom left, we have a tutorial for how you would build a theme of your own if that's what you need to do. So for instance, we've done some for UCR branding, right? We've had some that with blue and the gold and all the UCR kind of things associated with it for StoryMaps that we can make. Preview, if you click that, it lets you see what your StoryMap is going to look like on different devices, and that might inform some of your choices. Maybe what you think looks great on a desktop does not look so great when it's somebody experiencing on their phone. So this gives you an option of checking that out for phones, tablets, desktops, and then full screen. Now we've done the building, we've kind of just made some design decisions. It's time to start thinking about publishing our creation. The good news is that you can push publish, and you can still edit it after doing that. So no harm done. I do that all the time. Then you can go on continuing editing after publication, but your unpublished changes won't appear to anybody else unless or until you push publish again. And you can even unpublish and republish your StoryMap. So it's not the end of the world if you make it public, and then go, whoops, I didn't want to do that really right now after all. Yeah, so there's some There's some settings as far as how many people, what kind of people you're sharing it with, whether it's just the organization, or everyone in the world, or just yourself even. You could share it with groups within your organization, that kind of thing. Then additional actions, we have that ellipse at the top. I just wanted to show you what happens when you click that. Preview is really where you can go to actually print it, like physically print it on paper, or also publish it to a PDF. Story settings, you see things like you can choose language, choose what kind of date will be on the cover, whether it's an original publication date or something else, those kind of options. So also I created this screenshot for a draft story map. If I had created it for one I had already published, there would be increased things that you could do. Like this additional actions. I talked in the beginning about collections, and it's really a nice idea. You can create what's called a virtual binder that will help you showcase your work. You could just share the one URL to your whole collection of story maps instead of having to share individual links. It allows you to assemble a suite of related content. And in a sense, like treat your story maps as chapters in a larger narrative. So this comes in handy quite a bit for people like instructors who are having a class do story maps, and they can just put them all in a collection and just share the collection out instead of having 30 different links to share, and show what the differences are between what was done. Okay. Here is my resource slide. Again, they're providing lots and lots of support for people. They want people to get really interested in story maps and do great jobs with them, do great things. So this first link is, again, that one I pointed out earlier. It's kind of the not bare bones, but just the basic guide to building a story map. But then looking at other people's story maps is a great way to get ideas as well. All kinds of things here. But the very last part of my workshop today is to show you some alternatives to ArcGIS story maps. Again, just so you know that there are some. And one product, actually this slide and the next two are going to be products that Esri also produces. Experience Builder is like the next level up from story maps, I would say. Much more functionality. One big difference is that Experience Builder will support multiple pages. So far, we've seen story maps. You're on a site, you scroll, you're done, that's it. There's no extra pages that you can go to, but Experience Builder allows you to do that, allows you to do lots of other things. They have many templates, or you can build your own. And you also get to that through ArcGIS Online. A little bit more sophisticated possibilities, I guess you'd say. So here's that other product that Esri created just in the last year and a half, I think. It's called StoryMaps, but it's for the public. It's not for somebody who has an organizational account and is doing work for their organization or for their institution or whatever. There's a basic version, which is free, or if you pay some money, you can get more functionality. And it's not just a duplicate of ArcGIS story maps that we just looked at. Many features the same, but there's also some things that are different. So I don't know how else to describe it. But here's a screenshot of some of the stories that people have created for their own use. So it would be like if a friend of yours went on a trip and they wanted to share all their experiences from the trip, this would be something to recommend if they don't have like an organizational account. I just added this. It's not really an option anymore, but you may see some story maps that were created prior to 2019. And they don't look like the story maps we've been looking at today, because this was version 1. They're now called classic story maps. Remember some of those block palette things we had, like the swipe or the slideshow. It was kind of like, was it, you built a story map and that was a function it had. It was a slideshow or it was a map tour. You couldn't have multiple types of things built into a classic story map. But it's retiring now in 2025. Even things that people published using classic story maps are not going to be visible after 2025 fall. So they do not recommend, they make it really hard, in fact, to create a new story map. It's the classic story maps anymore. But just so you know, like you might see some, well, that doesn't look like what she was talking about, but yeah, they were made from between like 2013 and 20. And my very last slide is, here are some other alternatives that are not Esri products. For doing this similar things. I think the one that's probably hear about the most other than story maps is the StoryMap JS from NightLab. It is very much mappy though. It's like highlighting locations of a series of events. Get to it through Google. Time Mapper, I think, is a related product, which combines timelines and maps. Another one that might be of interest is Google Earth. Now, if you guys are interested in Google Earth or not, but they do have projects that you can create. Similar idea. It's very map-based though, about places around the world, and you can add text and photos and videos as you jump from one place in the world to another. They have a tutorial that you can work through. It's the life of Jane Goodall. So it takes you from where she grew up, where she was doing her research, and has all kinds of interesting content there. So again, if that suits your needs better than what I just showed you, you know, those are alternatives for you. That is it. We have a few minutes for any questions that you may have. But otherwise, I thank you so much for your attention. The link for the survey, I think, was shared in the chat. So would very much appreciate it if you would take just a minute to click on that survey. But otherwise, yeah, we can talk about anything that you saw that maybe wasn't clear, or extra questions.
Yeah, so if I were to make a story map, is that only going to be, it's exclusive to that site? I can't share it to other people, or if I could do they have to make an account to view it?
You can make a story map, say in ArcGIS Online at UCR, and then when it's time to publish, you can click, I think it's called Everyone, as an option, and then anybody, whether they don't have to be logged in or anything like that, they can see it. Yeah.
So what's the final format for the that page? That's URL or a PDF, or what's that?
Yeah, it's a URL.
It's a URL.
Yeah. But you have the option of making a PDF out of it.
Oh.
Yeah. I do that to store some of I have a series that I do. And I save the old ones as a PDF.
Mm-hmm.
And then I continue modifying my original URL as the next one. So it's kind of, it helps,
Would that PDF be as interactive or just like single pages?
It's single pages, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions from Zoom?
Comment, the timeline JS is the night timeline.
Yeah.
That's different than Time Mapper.
Oh,
Yeah, it's like timeline JS is the.
is that one? Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. It's been a while since I looked at those
I
products.
haven't used it in forever.
Yeah. Click on that.
Where are these slides? Are they posted online? Your slides?
They aren't. I was going to share them out afterwards by email. So yeah, and they have so many links that might help. So I think it's. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for your attention. Hope that was helpful in some way. Yeah, look for an email from me with It's gonna have the slides attached and where you can find the recording on the library. YouTube channel.